Spring 2021. 100,000 Russian troops mass along the border with Ukraine. The military buildup is the largest ever in the years-long conflict between the two countries. It's a battle fought between Ukraine's armed forces and Russia-backed separatists using Russian weapons who control the Donbas region in the country's east. Since 2014, 14,000 people have been killed, infrastructure and livelihoods destroyed. It's Europe's forgotten war. In April 2021, President Vladimir Putin turns up the heat. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky looks to the West for support. Germany and France seek to mediate. Countries in Eastern Europe are alarmed. The EU is torn between those who favor diplomacy and those who argue Putin has little interest in talking.
At the European or EU level, there is still no real, well-thought-out strategy on how to deal with Russia.
There is concern, too, that Putin's meddling in Ukraine is all about asserting Russian influence and undermining the unity of the West.
For Vladimir Putin, everything is geopolitical and geoeconomic. He has no respect for anyone.
Ukraine, once a part of the Soviet Union, remains vulnerable to Putin's revanchist ambitions.
We have to expect President Putin to not keep his word, not to play by the rules, and to be willing to use military force.
But we must remember another phrase of Putin. Putin once said that if a fight is inevitable, he must strike first. You have to remember that too.
What's at stake reaches far beyond the country's borders. Russia's action in Ukraine has triggered nothing less than a new Cold War, one that Europe appears powerless to stop. In this film, we talk to people on the street, international experts, and the president of Ukraine to discover why the country's war should serve as a wake-up call for all Europeans.
I think it will. It could possibly be World War III. And then Europe, our neighbours, the countries of the European Union, they will all suffer as a result.
"30 years since Ukraine gained independence from the Soviet Union, the country is caught in a conflict with Putin's Russia. Kiev wants to end the war. It accuses Moscow of fomenting unrest in Ukrainian sovereign territory.
They are actually leading the fighting in Ukraine. But nonetheless, it's hard to get to a point where you are talking about constructive actions to end the conflict if Russia is in fact denying that it's doing it.
Europe's big hitters, Germany and France, stand by Ukraine, but not at any cost.
Some people want to do business with Russia. The parliamentary group is very strong in Germany. The East Committee of the German economy is on the move massively. There is something else to add. There is a very large sounding board, a feeling of closeness to Russia in large parts of the German population, and more so than with the US.
Und zwar stärker als zu den USA.
Putin wants to reassert Russia's position as a global superpower. He appears determined to expand Russia's sphere of influence.
If, let's say, Russia swallows Ukraine, it makes it a different Russia. And this is the Russian calculus. It needs to control covertly or overtly Ukraine in order to expose and project also European influence.
Russian military maneuvers on the border with Ukraine in spring 2021 raised concerns Putin is indeed planning an attack. Kharkiv, in the east of Ukraine, lies just 40 kilometers from the Russian border. People fear the city is in the line of fire.
Когда я вчера услышал это, мне стало довольно страшно, потому что, насколько я знаю, они установили ракетную установку, которая стреляет на 270 километров до Харькова, извините, от Белгорода сколько? 45, если не ошибаюсь. И если мы получим удар, то, это все, это конец.
Ну, очень страшно, что это все дойдет до нас, и что придется принимать какие-то такие меры, как переезд и все такое, потому что никто не знает, как это все дальше будет развиваться.
Russia's unprovoked aggression towards Ukraine has alarmed many of us. We now see videos and live streams of people trying to survive in Ukraine. And meanwhile, we read and hear news about many countries and global businesses collaborating to punish Russia for Putin's actions. Now that Biden has banned Russian oil and gas, tensions continue to rise, with Russia announcing on Wednesday, March 9, 2022, saying that US has just begun an economic war against Russia, according to The Hill. Thus far, the US has avoided outright aggression towards Russia, choosing sanctions to discourage the war. We feel safer knowing that Biden has not chosen to escalate tensions with a nuclear power. In this situation, when guns come in, nobody wins. However, it has been encouraging to see companies and countries come out in opposition to the violence in the Ukraine and in support for the Ukrainian people. Many of us, having seen videos and images of the struggles happening in Ukraine, are particularly worried about getting civilians out of the country. It's hard to hear news about murdered children. It's hard to see war contents on social media apps, especially TikTok, which we think of as a kids app. It's easy to avoid reading the difficult news about Ukraine. For many students, thoughts of a war we can do nothing about is an additional stressor weighing on our minds. We encourage our peers, those who are able to educate themselves and bear witness to the injustice taking place in Europe at this time. For many of us, that's all we can do as allies. We must be sympathetic to the people impacted by this unprovoked war. When thinking about Putin and his actions in instigating this violence, it's sad to consider the fact that the Russian people will have to face the consequences of this war. Already, Russia is experiencing a financial crisis due to sanctions placed on the country by the rest of the world. And all of that is due to the nation's leader spiraling out of control. He is putting his people in a world of hurt, even though many of them don't want this war at all. Meanwhile, the people of Ukraine have surprised the global community with their persistence in resisting the invasion. However, they are fighting a massively unbalanced war, and it is difficult to see a future in which they will be victorious. For the time being, we'd like to give our peers and community members an important reminder. We must condemn any and all acts of hatred against Russian people in the US. Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, there have been a troubling amount of instances of hatred. Don't take fear and frustration out on people who have nothing to do with it. Decision making that led to this war doesn't involve Russian people. It certainly does not involve Russian people living in the US or in any country around the world. Even as we educate ourselves and provide any and all possible support to Ukraine, we can't let ourselves be sucked in a toxic hatred that would only contribute to more suffering in an already tragic situation. Thank you.